Good evening, our cherished viewers of TV3 and listeners on 3FM 92.7, and welcome to Eye on the Seat with me, WINSTON AMOAH. Now, recent media reports that the ruling NDC allegedly spent over 28 million Ghana cedis in the build-up to its recent manifesto launch, and Sunyani has reignited the debate for state funding of political parties. Those who argue for this motion hold the view that it will empower the parties to function more effectively. The argument has also been made that political parties, especially those in power, mostly appropriate public resources to fund their activities, since their funding sources are unknown and undisclosed. And to cure this, the proponents of state funding of political parties say it will reduce political incumbency advantage. Tonight on Eye on the Seat, we'll be analyzing whether it is really practicable to expect full state funding of political parties. Also, the political parties have been complaining about the Electoral Commission's filing fees. Now, presidential candidates are expected to pay 50,000 Ghana cedis, and parliamentary candidates are expected to pay 10,000 Ghana cedis. The Electoral Commission has said, look, if you make 25% of the votes as a presidential candidate, we'll refund your money to you. And if you make 12.5% as a parliamentary candidate, we will be refunding your money to you. So this evening on Eye on the Seat, we get to interrogate this issue also. Should the Electoral Commission consider reviewing the filing fees? Eye on the Seat is sponsored by TV3 Network Limited with support from Star Ghana. Star Ghana promoting transparency, responsiveness and accountability. And thanks for staying with us. Now, joining us tonight from my far left is Joe Jackson, who's a financial analyst, and Madam AYANA is former vice chairman of the Convention People's Party, CPP, and Dr. Justice BAWOLE is the head of public administration and health service management at the University of Ghana Business School, and I am WINSTON AMOAH. So I'd just like to start off with you, Joe Jackson, and I would want your take on the filing fee, even before we get to the funding of political parties. What's wrong with the Electoral Commission charging presidential candidates 50,000 Ghana cedis and parliamentary candidates 10,000 Ghana cedis?
Well, the issue is simply this, that if we want a democracy where everyone, regardless of how well resourced you are, still has a stab at putting his agenda forward and asking us to vote for them, then the higher the fees, the more difficult it will be. So it's very simple. When you have to look at those fees and say, at what point does the fee start to act as a disincentive and start to mitigate against the smaller parties presenting their agenda or having a way to engage with us on the same platform and say, listen, I know you have two parties that have typically played this game, but I am an alternative. Now, when your fees get to a certain point, you're not going to be able to do much about that. But on the other hand, you've got to ask yourself, how much are our presidential candidates spending on the election?
That's the point.
And if you're spending so many millions on the election, even as a smaller candidate, you can't spare 50,000 to cushion our EC. That's the debate. I tend to sit on the part which says, don't use filing fees as a way of disadvantaging the smaller parties.
How would it disadvantage the smaller parties?
Well, if I am a small party and I struggle to find 50,000, 100,000 for my whole campaign, taking 50,000 for the filing fees alone means that either I'm severely handicapped on my campaign level, or I may not even decide to go for the bid at all.
They've argued the election is serious business. If you're prepared to get in there, you should be prepared to pay the money.
I tend to say an election is a serious business, but an election should also allow us to listen to alternatives, regardless of how well-heeled they are. Remember also that whether we accept it or not, the party in power always has a huge incumbent advantage, always has a huge resource advantage. So every time you feel that there are certain impediments being put in the way, you ask yourself, but isn't this just going to assist the incumbent?
So what's your point? You think it's too much?
I think it's too much. I think simply because our electoral commission is fully funded by the state. If it wasn't, and the electoral commission had to have some internally generated funds or pay itself, then of course maybe the fee should be 1 million cedis. But hey, it's fully funded.
Yes, but if you get 25% of the votes, the money will be refunded to you. If you get 12.5% of the votes, the money will be refunded to you, the parliamentary candidate.
But my question is that, why do you need that money in the first place? Is it like we have? I mean, I take the issue now that look at the way we conduct our wedding ceremonies now. First, it was a token. They say 1 guinea. Now, it's a huge amount of money. So there are some young men who say, hold on, no, I can't get married now. It's the same thing. Take some money, take a token, but don't take an amount that starts to burn a hole in the smaller party's pocket.
Before I get to Madam AYANA, what would constitute that token that you're talking about?
Well, I would say this. What were the rates before? Why were they? What
10,000?
Yes, it was 10,000 before.
Yes.
Why did it go up 5-fold? Has inflation gone up 5-fold? Oh, yes. That's the point to tell us. So are we saying that the old rate was too low? If you told me, for example, that the rate must go up and we will let it go up by the rate of inflation year on year, okay. But 5-fold.
Okay, I'll get back to you, but let me get to Dr. BAWOLE. So, I mean, people have argued, if you want to lead this country, okay, if people believe in you, they should be prepared to support you, make this payment, shouldn't they?
Well, let me say good evening to your viewers and listeners. I think that this is a very interesting argument, very interesting debate. If I were a presidential candidate who had a large segment of the Ghanaian population, and we know how many people are poor in Ghana, the massage figures tell us that we have some past 20-something% of Ghanaians are poor. So if I were to have 25% of the population supporting me as presidential candidate BAWOLE, and I end up, I would be able to raise 25% of the votes at the end of the day. And you are arguing that 25% of the people should be able to mobilize this money to support me. But you and I know that 25% of the population cannot even feed themselves 1 meal a day. So what you are telling me then will be that, well, you have 25% of the population that is poor. They should be able to raise the money for you to go and file. If they cannot raise the money for you to file, then get out of here. What it means is that what we are defining as rights is now based on how much money people have. Unfortunately, the principles of our democracy does not argue that. The principles of our democracy say that we all are equal and should be able to put ourselves up for elections. There is nowhere in the Constitution that even qualifies this. Among the things that the Constitution requires us to be able to do, or all of our electoral laws require us to be able to do, one of them is no money.
Yes, but the Constitution doesn't stop you from raising funds.
Yeah, it says
so you can raise funds.
Yeah, sure. It says you have to be 18 years, you have to be of sound mind, you have to whatever, and all of that. It doesn't say you should be able to raise 10,000, 50,000 Ghana cedis.
Yeah, Dr. BAWOLE, the Constitution doesn't stop you from raising funds, so you can raise funds.
Well, I like to pick up from where my big brother stopped about. So if I raise that money, must I give the money to Electoral Commission? Why should I? The Electoral Commission should convince us why it requires that contestants must pay that amount of money. I am in public administration. I know that administrative agencies are and have obligation to raise some money. And so we will usually say, what is your internal general funds like? We know that the Electoral Commission, apart from the budget that is submitted to government and gets funded, and many times they have come to tell us that the government has given us all of the things that we have asked for. Many occasions, that's what they come to tell us. We know that the Electoral Commission also receives significant amount of support from donor partners. We know that Electoral Commission is not required to operate from its internally generated funds. So there must be some other reasons which we are not aware of, which is requiring the Electoral Commission to want to collect such big amount of money from contestants. We need to be able to create a scenario where if you are poor, you matter, and if you are rich, you matter. When we create a situation where only the rich can become, a class society is formed. Now what happens then is that you would get conflict entrepreneurs to take advantage of the majority, the poor, who feel deprived and who feel neglected and taken out of the decision-making system to say, well, we can provide you avenues to make your case. And many times making that case is not something we are excited about. So if you ask me, why must the Electoral Commission charge that money? I say they haven't said why they should. If you ask me whether electoral contestants and political parties can raise that money, well, of course, it's one of the reasons that I would use personally to see how many parties can show that in opposition they can raise resources. Because when you get into power, we anticipate that you would be able to put your acts together and to be able to raise financial resources to push the agenda that you have actually presented to us. So yes, it will be a requirement for us to, as individuals, to expect from our political parties that you should be able to raise money and you should be able to show that you have the capacity of mobilizing resources. But it should not be a condition for the Electoral Commission to say that if I cannot raise this amount of money, I should not contest. I am a teacher, right? Assuming that I decide now to contest for MP, and I cannot raise that money, do you know how much I'm paid? If I cannot raise that money, it means that I cannot contest as an MP. Am I a stupid person to stay off?
Somebody who believes in you, who believes you can deliver,
yes,
can
but
help
you see,
become an MP.
the difficult thing about who believes in me and funding me is what we have battled in this country for a long time. If anybody were to invest in me, and the other day I cited an example. If anybody was to believe in me so much, to put 50,000 in me as a presidential candidate, you think the person is a charity giver? You think the person is an NGO? You think the person just wants to throw his money away? The person will be expecting to get something back from me. What is it that person will be expecting to get back from me? He would expect to get me to say that I'm constructing that road to Yeji. I should give him that contract. I give him that contract. He does a shoddy job. And I know that I have taken money from him, so I cannot hold him to account.
Okay, I'll get back to you, but let me get to Madam AYANA for her take on this particular issue. You share their view?
Yes, I share their view. And when you ask the Electoral Commission as to why this particular amount, then you're told that they have a right to peg it at any amount that they feel. But then the question is, a political party is not for profit. We go out there sourcing for maybe grants, we don't get it. You go out looking for money for political activities, it's very difficult. Members in most of our parties do not pay dues. And that is not just for the CPP. But I can tell you that even the ruling party knows that their members, not all of them, pay dues.
Are you that unattractive?
It's not a question of being unattractive. It's a question of the economic situation in this country where people cannot even afford to let go of maybe 2 cedis a month. And it's one of those things where we have kind of like fed our members. I'm not talking about CPP, but politicians. We have fed our members to such an extent that they feel that everything should be given to them for free. And that is how come...
So it's your fault then, as political parties?
It is not our fault.
Because you have fed your members.
Yeah, but it's
the
system. The system has made it that way. The system has made it that way. I don't see why we should go out there paying so much for registration, to pick up a form to be a presidential candidate. When you need money to be on the fields, to go campaigning, it costs money. In 2008, when we paid monies, we were given pickups, okay? In 2012, we didn't have any pickups. To come 2016, you are asking us to pay this kind of money. Where do you expect us to get the money from? And then apart from that, you require from us to have regional officers, district officers, constituency officers, And these are all supposed to be what? Funded by the political parties. And we as smaller political parties do not have that kind of money. It is very difficult to run these offices, so that most of the time, what most political parties do is to run them in the last 2 years getting to elections. So you have an office for 2 years, then you have a skeleton staff. But come to think of it, in today's world, people are doing businesses from their briefcases, from their laptops. If I want to talk to my constituency chairman, say Cape Coast, I can get to him right now. I don't need to go to the office. So why do you want to see that physical thing there? You understand? So many things have changed in the world of business, and it's getting into politics. And therefore, you don't go around saying that we have to pay this and pay that. But then coming to say that an MP should pay 10,000, that's, let's put it, old Sikadadano, 100 million. You understand?
Yeah, but some of these MPs, and if I look at some of the filing fees that the MPs paid, even at their primaries, some paid more than that. Some paid 30,000.
You know, let's come to that.
Yes, you paid 30,000 in order to contest the primaries on the ticket of your political party.
Because some of those ones were deliberate. For instance, my party, if you wanted to contest, you paid so much, and it was because we needed the money to open offices, to buy so many other like stationery, to pay the office staff and all that. So we needed the money, and if you wanted to lead the party, then you must be.
So you have the money now.
We don't have the money because
you needed the money. You don't have it.
No. We needed the money at that time from our presidential candidates. It was for that one time. Because if you are going to run a party, you need officers, and the EC was calling for officers. Well, how come you're going to get? How are you going to get to be a presidential candidate if you don't have a party with an office?
Are the parties broke? Is your party broke?
Of course, my party is broke. Of course, my party doesn't have money. My party has been out of power for God knows what, from 1966 till date.
Do I get the impression when you're in power you get money as a party?
It is not just a.
Since you say your party has been out of office since 1966.
Yes, exactly. Because when you are in office, at least your membership gets to work. They pay dues.
Should that be the case?
That should be the case.
That your members get to work because you're in office? Your members
get to work, and that is the case right now.
Should that be the case?
That shouldn't be it, but that is what we are with. Because I can tell you that 4 years ago, I know of a political party that could not even afford their rent for their headquarters. Today, they have built a complete new headquarters.
You're talking about the NDC?
I'm talking about the NDC. You understand what I'm saying? So it just goes to tell you
that. You know that for a fact they couldn't afford money for their headquarters?
It came in the papers. It was in the papers that the rent was out. Landlord wanted his money because they couldn't pay. It came in the papers.
So you're suggesting when they got into office, they've been able to make money and build
people then
a multi-million office.
Yes, because suddenly people realize that, well, they're in office and maybe we can get the contracts, we can get everything we want, and therefore they will start paying.
You're making reference to kickbacks.
Whatever. Call it anything that you want to call it. But it exists. After all, that office was a gift from philanthropists. But we wouldn't get that. What we are actually looking for is one of our own, our office, that was also built by our own membership contributions, which was seized, and we can't even get that one back. For me, an ordinary Ghanaian coming from Bunkurguyoyo or Garu, who is, let's say, a worker in the hospital, maybe a community health nurse, very passionate about his community, wanting to stand as a member of parliament, is being denied the opportunity because that person cannot raise 10,000.
Good.
And for me, that is wrong.
Now that would lead us into another area because the PPP has gone to court. We just wait to see, what would happen, when the court gets to sit on that particular issue. But, listening to all of you, it leads us to one point: state funding for political parties. And we've been talking about this for God knows how many years. I start off with you, Dr. Bawole. Should we be considering, as a state, funding of political parties?
Well, if you ask me, I will say we are not there yet. We are not there yet because we are actually asking political parties to pay money to the state, as it is now. So
they say they don't have it, so should we be funding them then? They say, we don't have it, there's incumbency advantage, we can't compete with incumbent government. If you
ask me, I would have said, well, can we get to that point where the state is not asking the political parties to pay money to it first? And then we can think about whether or not the state should give money to the political parties. Madam talked about something, and it's quite exciting to talk about it. When you engage the Electoral Commission, and when people begin to pass on blame to the Electoral Commission about the fact that it doesn't educate, and that the NCC doesn't educate, and when we go into the polls, we get a lot of reject ballots, they will tell you it is the role of the political parties to educate their members. So you see the state and a state institution that is passing the buck of what its responsibilities are to political parties to fund. And the political parties go around mobilizing resources to do that kind of activity on behalf of the state agency. And then they say, well, you, in addition to that, give us money. I think that at some point we need to consider whether or not we want to pay to support political parties with some funding.
Tell me what your view is. What should we do? If I'm to ask you, since we have to consider, let's do the consideration now.
I would wait a while to make that declaration. So I would, for example, say, as I said, let's get to that point where the state decides to take off all the burdens from political parties. So educating the citizenry, the state will do that. Not asking for money from the political parties, the state will do that, and all of that. You know why I say that is that I am a passionate supporter of state funding of political parties. I support that passionately. But why are you saying we take our time? You see, you don't want to put your head on the chopping board and say nobody should chop it. It will get chopped off. The point that I want to make is that we have a state that is currently asking political parties and individuals, not just political parties. So, for example, if I were to go out there and say I want to contest as an independent candidate, I'm going to be asked to pay the same amount of money. Assuming that I was a cocaine dealer, assuming that I was an armed robber, assuming that I was a supporter of any armed group across the world, any of those outlawed ones, and assuming that I could get that kind of money, what it means is that I would easily run for the presidency in Ghana. And if I can access that amount of resources, I could easily become the president of Ghana. And if I can become the president of Ghana as funded by a drug group, you can imagine what will happen to us.
Okay.
So it is important that in our reflection over what we want to do, we need to take care of all of these. But if you ask me whether or not we should fund political parties, I would have, like Madam said, in the past it was that based on your past experience and your past performance.
But Dr. Bawole,
yes.
If you say a drug baron could fund you, for instance,
yes,
because you do not have money, then if the state funds you, the state is taking away that, fear or that problem of somebody funding you because of your need or your quest for money.
Yes, that's what I was going to go to. So I was going to go to that, but I was going to ask the question. I know, and I have examples in Ghana.
Give the examples.
For example, there was some time that the Ghana AIDS Commission used to invite NGOs to come get money to go and do HIV and AIDS campaigns. We suddenly found out that there were several people who did not have NGOs, but they managed to create NGOs, and then they got money from Ghana AIDS Commission. Ghana AIDS Commission couldn't trace some of them to report back and all of that. So my caution is where we say, let political parties come get money, and then everybody begins to form a political party, because a lot of people are poor. And in fact, I would not hesitate to form one. If I could get money, I could get 4-wheel drives and drive around, and after campaign, I keep them. So my caution is that let's be careful, and that is where I take it from where Madam stopped. He says, if you got this kind of percentage of support, the state will subvent you with this amount of money.
Now, you stated that you've always been a supporter of state funding of political parties.
Yep.
At the time, what convinced you? Why were you in support of it?
In fact, I'm still a supporter of
the state party. Why are you in
support? So if you were listening to me carefully, my argument is that let the state support political parties, but let's put in place a measure that ensures that people don't just come up because the state says he wants to support political parties. So then I form a political party, even if I don't have the capacity to, or I don't want to do. So we will want to fund political parties, but we will fund political parties that have shown that they are viable. And how will you show that you are viable? It's been done in Ghana before, where you get, for example, IEA say you have to have gotten a certain percentage of the votes to qualify, or a certain percentage of representation in parliament to qualify to debate and stuff like that. So there are mechanisms that can be used to weave out people who just come in because they want to come in because of the money, and people who are actually wanting to do political partyism. So that's my point. I think the state can or should at some point support political parties. Why? Because we all know that incumbent governments always have state funding. Like it or leave it.
The truth.
Right? The president goes everywhere campaigning, but he is a sitting president. The past presidents have done the same. They go campaigning. You are out of, you don't get. And that is why they never get interested in talking about it when they are in power. Why? Because when they are in power, the state is funding them anyway. So why should they ask for it for other people? When they leave power, then they come and tell us, well, let the state fund it. And that's why we have never gone there. Okay. So I think that we need to find mechanisms that allow other political parties to benefit from the largesse of the state.
Let's find that mechanism. Let me get to Madam Ayana on what mechanisms we should put in place to ensure that, political parties are able to benefit from the largesse of the state.
Let's look at the campaigns as they go. Do we get equal representation even when it comes to media?
Tell me.
Sometimes you don't. There are occasions where you will have, it's like you have to apply, you have to write, and all those things. And apart from that, when you go campaigning, you need money to move. You need to fuel your cars, you need to fuel God knows what. And therefore, people would call and ask, we don't see CPP. And we'll just come out and tell you, we are there in the field. The only thing is we cannot make the noise that you expect us to make, but we are talking to people. We are going door to door. We've changed our own style because we don't have the money to go like everybody else is going. You understand? The state funding us means that it will give us an opportunity, at least to get our officers, to get vehicles, to be able to do party education, to be able to do voter education. It will also enable us to at least come out with our policies, do some write-ups.
But Madam Ayana, before you get a certificate to register as a political party, you must have these officers.
Yes, before you...
So even before the state comes in, you should have provided them.
But that's the more reason why we're saying that...
But you need to be a political party before you be funded by the state.
Okay, so be it. Once you have it and you have but like he said, we can't make it an open issue that if once you have a political party, you must be funded. There might be some guidelines. And for now, if you have representation in parliament or a certain percentage of the votes, valid votes, then you can get some funding. But then when we talk about the funding, it's not just in monetary terms, logistics. And that was what I thought the EC was trying to do, so that in 2008, they were able to give political parties vehicles. And that helped a great deal. In 2012, I don't know what changed. We didn't get any vehicles.
Did you find out why you didn't get any vehicles?
I don't know what happened, but we were expecting to get the vehicles. And when the vehicles did not come, what we were told was that there was no money.
The EC told you there was no money?
There was no money. As to where the money was going to come from, we didn't know. But then now, if you're asking us to pay the 50,000 and the 10,000, are we going to get the vehicles? Because if we're going to get vehicles, maybe someone will say, well, for the price of vehicles as compared to this, then we might just take it. But then at a time like this, when we are looking for money to buy vehicles, we're looking for money to field people around to at least go out there and campaign and canvass for votes. If you're asking individuals to pay this, it's not going to work. And when we say that the state should fund political parties, if you blow the whistle now, assuming they're giving everybody $1 million, I get 1 million, PNC gets 1 million, GCPP gets 1 million, we will still not be on the same line as the two other big political parties.
Why wouldn't you?
Oh, please. Already, they are way ahead of us. When it comes to
even also in opposition, like you.
They just came from a ruling spree, right? They just left. Look, if you want to know of
are you
parties,
saying they took some money?
Oh, please. I mean, look, once why is it that? Listen, why is it that? I was showing someone, I said, look, a couple of years ago, NDC flags were so small, so small, from my road at Ajungano. This time they are big. Why?
Times have changed, eh?
Times have changed. And that's the truth. I mean, we have to be honest and candid about this thing when we are discussing it. We have to be candid about it because, you see, we are living in a country where we cannot even differentiate between government and party. Are you getting me? Okay. So at the end of the day, if you are in government, your party rules, and that is how it is. You don't sit down to think about where you're going to get money to pay 10,000 for an MP. The MPs that are there, 100 and something, they already have the 10,000. It's me, that person.
I'll get back to you, Madam Ayana. Let me get to Joe Jackson and find out from Joe Jackson. We're looking at, how you go about it. Dr. BAWOLE has talked about it. Madam Ayana has talked about it. How must the state go about it? How do you get to identify, the political parties that you can fund? What modalities should be put in place to ensure that we know that, okay, this is how we intend going about it?
The problem with your question is that you presume
that he supports.
that I support. I'm sorry, I don't support state funding for
Why don't
political
you support
parties.
it?
Because everything the state touches goes bad. The state should not be in the business of supporting the funding of parties. In the same way, the state should not be in the business of so many other things. The state, anything the state is doing is an opportunity for corruption. I believe that our state should be dropping in size, not adding on funding of political parties, adding on a new airline, adding on funding of shoe factories, adding on whatever they need to fund. I disagree with that. So we shouldn't be looking at ways of funding political parties. We should make things better, easier for people to fund political parties. For example, if I fund a party, if the state wants to help people fund parties, if I fund a party, give me a tax break. Then you're giving me an incentive to fund the party. But don't put money, all you're putting is just another source of leakage, another way to people to chop money, another way for them to do all the things that we see happening in this country, we smell happening in this country, we hear happening in this country, but we have no proof.
Yes, but I mean, you heard Dr. Bawole argue, for instance, that look,
I heard his argument,
yes,
but
at
I
the end
don't
of it,
agree with him.
somebody, gets to give you some bit of funding, and the person is expecting something, and then what happens? So he says, why wouldn't the state get involved?
No. So that's wrong. That's wrong. Our state is already too big. Our state is the biggest employer, is the biggest borrower, is the biggest lender, is the biggest everything. For one state, stay out.
I'll get back to you, but let me get to Dr. Bawole. You want to revise your position now? Because he's told us that for him, the state must just stay out of this.
I mean, if you ask me, you know that I in public administration, one of the hottest topics we treat would usually be state enterprises.
Yes.
And that is why I get back to my Nkrumah. I get back to my Nkrumah because you see the passion with which Nkrumah came. You see the passion with which Nkrumah dotted this country with all manner of things that would give young people something to do and all of that. And then we see the same thing now, everything being run down, like my big brother said, everything is being run down. So I have argued, I'm not sure whether on this platform when the sugar factory thing came, that I don't believe in government's
It was
support.
here, yes.
It was here.
Yes.
I said, I don't believe in government going in to do business. I don't believe in that. I think that government should create the environment to allow individuals to do business. And that is why I always ask the question, if this were your father's business, would you do this? So I'll ask that question. Why I take a different position from between political parties and state enterprises is that we need to be able to create that platform that allows even poor people to be able to put themselves up for election. Because it's a constitutional right, and so it should not become a basis of denying people. Financing should not become a basis of denying people. And two, we should be seeking to create a platform that equalizes. A platform that equalizes means that if I am the current president, and I have access to all the resources and I can run a flamboyant campaign, especially in a system where there are no ways to hold people accountable, then it means that if we don't support the other political parties who are not in power, you can as well just imagine that one party will remain in power for a long time. And as it is now, maybe some miracles would happen. Otherwise, it's a very difficult thing for the other parties, apart from NPP and NDC, to be able to mount any strong campaign that will make them acceptable and that will make them be able to galvanize the votes they need to be able to win power.
Okay.
So, and what even makes it worse is that we do not run a proportional representation system that allows whatever vote they have accumulated, whether 10%, 1%, or whatever, to matter in deciding who becomes. In this case, so when we finish the election and 49.9% of us decide against one party, or decide for one party, and 50 point whatever percent decide, all the rest of us and our votes have become useless. And that is what makes it very important that we need to find ways to ensure that the votes that people are able to collect become relevant. And if these votes have to become relevant, then it means that the state must ensure that we are competing on a very even platform. And if we can do that, then it means that if the party in government is getting a lot, the others must at least get something to be able to. So that is my position when it comes. That is why I revised my position from my usual position of state don't engage in business into political parties. I say state make sure there is some kind of support for political parties.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would continue to get a lot of small parties stay in. In fact, there is no actually point in Ghana. I keep asking myself the question: why would somebody put themselves up? So when I see presidential candidate Edward Mahama on a campaign, sometimes I feel very,
Why?
And many others. Because when you prick your conscious self and ask the question, will this man win? It becomes difficult sometimes when you look at the things that go on. I'm not saying that they can't win power, because there have been places in the world where parties that never anybody ever thought that they would
I'll get back
won.
to you. I'll get back to you, but this time around, without presuming, let me go back to Joe Jackson and find out: can we have an equal platform for all political parties?
It's difficult.
I'll give you an example. Let's take TV3, right? There's no incentive for you to give time and space to a political party because it costs you money to operate.
Yeah.
Now, what if, just what if, the government said, each time you give money to airtime, etc., to a political party, I'll take it off your taxes. All of a sudden, then I have to come and make a pitch to you and say, I have a message and give me time. And it will not actually cost me raw hard cash to pay. Or even if it did, at a minimal amount. But that's what I mean by give incentive for people to fund the parties and undertake. But government, stay out. Government, don't come near this one too. Don't come and spoil it for us too. Already too many things are spoiled.
Okay, well, but talking about, for us at TV3, yes, for us at TV3 on the platform, we give political parties, free airtime to come and present, their programs and policies to the Ghanaians.
How much? Over which time period? Compare that to those who
course,
are
it
well
costs you money.
resourced
Yeah, of course it
to
costs you
buy
money.
airtime, and parties will come and between now and election buy how many slots a day for their adverts.
This is Eye on the Seat with me, Winston AMOAH, also live on 3FM 92.7 in Accra. We go for a short break. When we return, I'll be asking Dr. BAWOLE and Madam AYANA, because they support state funding of political parties, how we go about the representation bit of it. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. This is Eye on the Seat with me, Winston. I'm also live on 3FM 92.7 in Accra. And Eye on the Seat is sponsored by TV3 Network Limited with support from Star Ghana. Star Ghana promoting transparency, responsiveness, and accountability. So we're not talking about, state funding of political parties. And I would want to get to you, Madam AYANA, since you support it and you've been telling us how we need to look at a way of going about it. How do we go about it? So, for instance, how do we determine, for instance, say, this is the political party that qualifies to be supported or funded by the states?
I was of the view that we could go by probably if you have a representation in parliament, for instance, or a certain proportion of the votes. But when I look at the scenario, the other thing that comes to mind is that institutions such as the NCCE, if they were resourced properly to actually do their job that's mandated to them, it would help create some form of awareness. You see, there is a lot of illiteracy in this country when it comes to elections and the reasons why we vote. If you go around this country asking people, why do you have to vote for this person, or why are you following this party, you'd hear ridiculous answers. Because the flag bearer is handsome, because the flag bearer is from my region, because you understand.
All over the world, that works.
And then sometimes they'll tell you, oh, these people have lots of people. No one is talking about policies. Very few people will tell you that this party has done this, has done that. I expect this from this party. And we are expecting that the NCC would at least do that job. The district assemblies, unfortunately, they become so politicized that you cannot even use them.
So let's look at the representation bit of it.
So the representation is one aspect.
And you're looking at those who have, representation in Parliament?
In Parliament.
Or you're looking at the percentage of the votes?
Both of them.
And if you're looking at percentage of the votes, which percentage would you go for instance, just to
for me,
understand?
Looking at numbers, for instance, if we look at constituencies, there are some constituencies that you might have 100,000 and another constituency just 2,000. So I cannot really pick out and say 5%. 5% of which?
Total votes.
Okay, 5% of total votes, 1% of total votes. But I just feel that we must come to a certain, maybe 5% of the total votes.
5% of the total votes. Unfortunately, in the last,
none of the
other political parties have been able to get 5% of the votes. 2%. So you're just telling us that the state should be funding the NPP and NDC?
No, I'm just telling you that if the state decides to fund political parties, we will get to 5%. We will get discerning Ghanaians who are out there wanting to vote for us. But because they don't see us, we are not visible enough, and then they don't hear us give out our policies. We are saying if the state decides to support us, we will get 5%.
If the state decides to support you,
we will get 5%.
You would become so visible that you will get 5%.
Yes, we will be.
Why don't you do it now then?
Because we don't have the money.
But that 5% is what is supposed to qualify you for the state to fund you.
No, but we can't. We have to start from somewhere.
Exactly the point.
And therefore,
so before you start, so why don't you do it now? But say if the state says I will fund you,
if it's a question of before you start,
then you get in there.
Then it means that once you're able to register with your officers and all that the EC is required of you, if you're able to do it, then you must go in for state funding. That's it.
Okay, let me get to Dr. Bali and look at the representation bit. I mean, what should be the quota? How do we go about it?
I'm not too sure. I really need to go through this again to be able to offer any informed opinion. But I was wondering, when you talked about quota and representation and all of that, I was wondering, if somebody decides that I want to run as an independent candidate, what will be the basis of deciding? So I show up, okay, now I have a lot of students, so I've become interested. I want to contest President Mahama and Akufo-Addo and all of the people who I want to contest. Will you say I should contest and get a percentage before I get the money? Or will you say that I should get the money and contest and prove that I can win 5%? I'm not too sure which way it goes. So we need, that's why I say I need to go back and look at this and see whether or not there is any way that this has been done in other jurisdictions. The business school had we call it Management Week last year. In fact, it was earlier this year. And we invited the Honorable Bagbin was the one speaking on it, and Honorable Kandapa was speaking on it as well. And Honorable Bagbin gave a very excellent paper, some research work across the world of what exists. The topic was funding of political parties. So he gave a paper
So we're talking about political parties.
Yes.
So if you're an independent candidate, that's one other thing.
Yes.
We're talking about political parties.
He gave a very
so if you're
excellent,
a party, come.
Where there are different mechanisms that are used to define what becomes the case. For example, the issue about how many votes you have in terms of percentage. For example, in Ghana, I think one of the interesting ones we can actually use is the law that requires political parties to have representation in terms of presence in the districts and the constituencies and the regions. Before you qualify to be registered, you need to show that you have done this in a certain percentage of the constituencies and all of that. But again, I keep asking myself the question, do people just go out there and create a facade of existence of offices and get registered? Otherwise, these political parties who get to contest, I don't see their places when I go around. So one way could be that the Electoral Commission will not just be probably sitting in Accra and saying that people have met the requirement. How often do they check to be sure that these offices that are painted are actually real offices that are working? And based on that, we decide that we have found 50% functional offices which has offices, people working in them, and which have some resemblance of activity and all of that. And then based on that, we say you qualify for something. So we can use the representation, we can use the activity of political parties within the regions, their presence, and whether or not they have functional offices and all of that. One other thing that we might want to use is how much money do these political parties generate? The EC requires that the political parties will file their returns and show their accounts, audited accounts, and all of that. When they submit that, how much money do they show that they have actually utilized? We could say that depending on how much money you are able to raise and all of that, you get a certain percentage of the whatever is available. Let me say that if this is thought through well, there could be a very beautiful formula. The District Assembly's Common Fund, for example, has a formula that is used. There are a number of elements in that formula, one of which I love a lot is the formula of equalizing. So we say that from the start, each political party gets a certain figure, flat figure. So everybody gets that. So if you are a registered political party, in other words, if you have met the requirement of EC to qualify to register and you are registered, you get that amount. And then we will say, well, based on how much money you generate, you can get a certain percentage of whatever you generate. So how much have you increased your own internally generated funds? And then we could also use other which are the poor political parties. On some indicators, poor political parties will get more than the rich political parties. Stuff like that can be used.
Okay. Let me get to George Jackson. You wanted to say something.
I wanted to make a contribution to
Go
this
ahead.
argument. So one of the very reasons why the state shouldn't get into this business is the difficulty of establishing what fair and equitable means to share the money. Now, let me give you a story.
Go ahead.
Suppose my constituency, I come from Senyabriku. That's my village. Let's say I'm a teacher in Senyabriku. Let's say I'm incensed about what is happening in this constituency. And I want to contest. And I want to take on the sitting MPs and the opposition MPs, and I believe I have a voice. Let's say I'm a true member, a true son or daughter of the soil, and they know me as someone who goes around, who is involved in community-based activities, and who really has this passion, this community. By your basis, however you judge it, I'll get 0 because I knew. That for me is not fair. Because any measure that is based on some historical information excludes anybody who is new.
Yeah, sure.
Any measure that is based on how we raise money is just an extension of what we have now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Any measure that is so all we do is to just go through one measure that disenfranchises one party or another measure. Stay out. Let us spend our efforts creating one. I love your suggestion about the NCC. Let's educate people about why they need to fund political parties. Let us create, after all the money we spend are in specific areas. Let us create a reason why people will want to fund political parties and will want to go online and send an SMS because they are donating 30 pesos, and will want to come and give you 100,000 if they can afford it. And between that range, anything else. But let the state stay out of this business.
But you know, you and I know that if anybody were to give you 100,000,
talk to me. Yes.
You know that if anybody were to give you 100,000, they were going to show up tomorrow and say that, well, that's KVIP. I have to be the one to build it.
My response is
I know that this is yes. I agree with a lot of the arguments you make, but this is virtually like
catch-22.
Extremely difficult. If you go, you are there. If you are you don't go, you don't.
So what's your response then, Joe Jackson?
My response is that up to now, the only incentive for giving you 100,000 is the KVIP contract. Let us give you another incentive for giving me money. You see, we sit down and we complain about the situation, but the only incentive I have for giving anybody any significant sum of money is because I expect something. What if, as a nation, we said there's a tax incentive, there's some other incentive, there's an incentive that shows that each person who donates to a political party is showing some patriotism, is showing some, then we can start to have a dialogue.
Okay. Well, we need to be wrapping up. Finally, let me start off with you, Madam Ayana. And this, I want us to look at accountability, of the political parties. How accountable are the political parties themselves to the EC, for instance? How often do they present their audited accounts to the Electoral Commission?
We, at least I know that we do. We don't have that much money not to be able to present our accounts, so we do. I don't know about the bigger parties. Well,
not so long ago, the bigger parties did not, submit their accounts to the EC. They didn't.
So that's another thing. So for us, it's very easy to present those accounts, I can assure you, because the figures that we get doesn't give us headaches to be able to put up the accounts for the EC. Yes,
you can explain where the money is coming from.
You can explain where the money is coming from.
Because there isn't much.
Because there isn't much. So.
Okay, finally, Dr. Bawole.
Well, I think that a number of things come up that we need to be able to get political parties to be themselves accountable. Not just accountable to the EC, but accountable to their members. If you listen to members of political parties, they usually complain about monies that were meant for some activities that never got to where they were supposed to go, and all of those things. And to support my big brother's argument, these are some of the things that actually do not entice people to want to give money out. Because if I come and give you 100,000 for your campaign, and that money will end up in one person's pocket, it doesn't go to the field, then you are not making ourselves attractive enough for people to give money. So I think more and more it will be the responsibility of political parties to be more transparent and all of that. And that will create some level of confidence in people that if I vote for CPP, because they offer an accountable system, when they go into governance, they are likely to do the same, and therefore let me support them. So we need to see a lot more political parties being, forthright with us with information and all of that. And of course, with the institutions that they are supposed to be, they are mandated to be responding to and supporting. But otherwise, I think that we need to think through this issue about funding political parties. Otherwise, we should also find a way to stop incumbent governments from taking states' resources for their appropriation.
Joe Jackson, finally.
Finally, in as much as parties have a responsibility to be transparent and accountable to their members, there's one party that I want to take on. I wish the EC will have half the teeth it uses to levy new fees.
Absolutely.
To punish parties who don't submit their accounts on time. Show some teeth, EC. Show some teeth.
And you're talking about the NPP and NDC?
Yes. Yes, again. Show some teeth.
Okay. Well, our time is up. Thank you very much, Joe Jackson. Thank you very much, Madam AYANA, and thank you, Dr. Justice Bawole. And of course, thank you for doing the watching and also listening to us on Eye on the Seat. Eye on the Seat is sponsored by TV3 Network Limited with support from Star Ghana. Star Ghana, promoting transparency, responsiveness, and accountability. My name is Winston Amadou. Have a lovely evening.